Welcome, everybody, to the Cover 2 podcast, back after a 2-week break. Couple things happened to us. Jared got deathly sick, and I visited the great city of Boston, Massachusetts. But we're back on a good day. There's not really a lot of sports going on today, so we can kind of talk about everything that's happened.
A lot to catch up on.
Yeah, a lot to catch up on. Obviously, the MLB playoffs are going on. The NFL is now in full swing. Storylines developing. We're seeing which teams really are contenders and which teams are pretenders as well. So all that and a lot more. We're gonna do a little edition of Cover 5 at the end of the show. So we're gonna try to hit on as many sports as possible. But Jared, how have your last 2 weeks been since we last recorded?
Well, this last week has been great. I was not sick. I was able to recover. Obviously, a lot of work and that type of thing. The previous week, the first week we were off air, was miserable. I did have the stomach flu. I could barely get out of bed. I had the sweats, and there was no way I was going to be able to make it here. So I'm sorry that we were not able to do the podcast 2 weeks ago. My fault for getting sick. JT Smith's, I will not be eating at your restaurant establishment for a very long time. I'm sorry to put you guys on blast, but I am almost 100% sure that I got sick because of you guys. So just want to throw that out there. Thank you, JT Smith's. But yes, I am back, recovered. Nick, how was your trip to Boston? I see you're wearing a Boston University pullover.
Exactly. Yeah, my trip to Boston was great. I went over there to visit my girlfriend who's going to college over at Boston University.
Oh, smart girl.
Exactly. And so I went over there and, it was kind of just to go hang out and stuff like that. And I like the city of Boston. I've been to New York. I've been to Boston. I prefer Boston a little bit. But something cool happened. On Friday of last week, I ended up buying tickets to Yankees and Red Sox and went to Game 1 of the division series between those two teams. It was a fantastic atmosphere. One of the best, if not the best atmosphere I've ever been for a sporting event. Those Boston fans are effing crazy, man. I was telling Jared off air right before we started the show, there's not a lot of rules at Fenway Park. You can kind of say, do, and act however you want there, and it makes it for a fun atmosphere. The kind of atmosphere I like to be at, where I can drink and not worry about my decisions later in the night.
It's not like Angel Stadium where you can't even say damn, or else someone's going to come and escort you out.
Oh yeah, no, exactly. So there was a lot of cussing, lots of fingers being thrown up, and an overall great game. It was a great start to the game too. The Red Sox struck out the side, and then JD Martinez hit a line drive homer in the first inning, and kind of got the game started. But yeah, so that was obviously a great trip. Great fun, but glad to be back here talking about sports. I missed a lot when I was over there too because I was so busy too. At one point, I didn't even know the NHL season had started. I was so busy over there.
That's very surprising for a hockey fan.
No, exactly. So it was like I assumed it was starting 2 days later. I was just on the Kings schedule, and I didn't realize the Capitals and all these teams were playing the 2 days before. So, it was fun, but I'm back, ready to go, and I think we can just keep jumping into these playoffs right now because luckily for our podcast's sake, the division series is over now, so we can kind of discuss everything that's going on. We can look up to the championship series as we have our final four left in the MLB. So Jared, what were your thoughts on the division series? You may have actually watched more than I did just because I was so busy over in Boston.
Right, I did get to watch a little bit more probably than you did. And two of those series were sweeps, and they were, I would say, I don't want to say boring because it's the playoffs, but they were more or less uneventful. And those series would be the Brewers, who swept the Rockies, and also the Astros, who swept the Indians. And I think I'm a little more surprised by the Indians sweep. Right? I mean, listen, we all know how good the Astros are. They are the defending World Series champions. We understand that. But the Indians, coming into the season and the last 2 years, have been a very, very competitive team. And going into this postseason, I'm not saying that I expected the Indians to defeat the Astros in the series, but I would have expected more of a fight. And the fact that they came out and put up a goose egg in the win column was a little interesting to me. I want your thoughts because I know you're a little more of a baseball guru than I am. So is there anything you can add on to that as far as why you think the Indians weren't able to get a win?
No, well, here's the thing. So if you look at the way the standings came out, the Indians had the worst record of all the playoff teams, right? If the MLB would fix its playoff system, they could actually make the MLB playoff system better in the regular season, even more competitive than it already is. If they just made the two worst teams the wild card teams. It doesn't make any sense that Cleveland, because they're in a geographical area, end up getting in the division series with 90 wins. It just doesn't make any sense. Whereas the A's won 97 and had to play in the wild card game. We could have possibly had Red Sox and Yankees in the championship series if they would maneuver this around. But I'll hit that maybe in Cover 5 a little bit later and kind of go on more of a rant about it because I think it needs to be changed. But nonetheless, the Indians were the worst team in the playoffs. If they were fighting for a wild card, they would have barely made it in over the Mariners and Rays this year. So it wasn't more of a surprise that the Indians were disappointing. It was more of a surprise that Houston's back. And as a Dodger fan with bad memories from from late October, early November last year, to see the Astros hitting home runs and to hear that stupid train horn in Houston go off multiple times again is a scary thought. And it's got to be a scary thought for the rest of the league, specifically the American League, because they're good again. They have great pitching. They have Verlander. They have Garrett Cole. And then their hitters are starting to get going. George Springer, I saw a stat the other day, has hit 7 home runs his last 7 games in the playoffs. That's unheard of. Okay, and Alex Bregman's playing like an MVP. So it's more surprising to me that the Astros are playing so well because they didn't end the season particularly well. Than the Indians. I thought the Indians would lose that series. They were the worst team in the playoffs. So not necessarily surprised they're eliminated. Didn't think it would be a sweep, but Houston, the story here is more that Houston is starting to kick ass again.
Really, see, I'm surprised by your comments there because I understand you want to go into the playoffs kind of hot, right? You want to go in there on somewhat of a winning streak and feeling good about yourselves. But if you're the Astros, listen, you're playing a 162-game season, so I think at some point you kind of get a little bored, and it's like, okay, we know we're good. We know that we're going to make the playoffs, right, because we're in – well, at the beginning of the year, I would have said the AL West was pretty weak. There were some surprise teams with the Athletics, coming on strong towards the end. But really, the Astros were like, okay, all we need to do is stay healthy, and we're going to make the playoffs.
You get to 100 games, you're probably going to make the playoffs.
Right. Yeah. So I think they kind of were on cruise control heading into the playoffs, but they turned it on right away. Game 1, they put up 7 runs. Game 2 was more of an average game, a 3-1 win over the Indians. And then the closeout game, they put up a nice 11 runs.
And that was after the Indians took a lead and hit a big home run, too. So it was... the offense just is absolutely clicking for the Houston Astros right now. They had some help from the A's because the A's were right behind them. But it was it was most of the time everyone knew they were going to win the division. They got off to such a hot start, too, at the beginning of the season. You're right, they might have got bored. But it just, the whole year they haven't collectively as a team hit like they did last year. And they're starting to get to that point now. Now, I'm not saying Altuve's hit okay. Correa has struck out a lot. Bregman and Springer, who are kind of I would say the 3rd, 4th best players on that team, are the ones leading the charts. So if those guys are hot, you get Correa and Altuve, and then with this pitching staff, and this team is just, it's tough. Now, if we move on to the Brewers and Rockies, that sweep made a lot more sense to me. And that is because the Rockies, man, they had to travel a lot the last couple of days. We missed it on this podcast. Obviously, you had a couple play-in games before the wild card game. You had the Dodgers and Rockies, and then you had the Brewers and Cubs. And so the Brewers and Dodgers ended up making that. They got to the division series, whereas the Cubs and the Rockies had to play in the wild card game. Rockies eventually got through it, but at one point the Rockies went from Colorado on Sunday to LA, back to Chicago on Tuesday, and then up to Milwaukee for a game, I believe it was on Thursday. And then, a couple days later, they're going back to Colorado. It just was too much. I think they got jet lagged. I think they got jet lagged out of the playoffs. And that's what happens when you don't win the big games. The Rockies had a clear lead in the NL West at the end of the season, and they lost it. They lost a terrible game to the Nationals. And let the Dodgers sneak into that play-in game, which you couldn't do because everyone knows Dodgers have some of the best talent in the MLB. And you let them sneak into that game, and the Rockies just you got to win the big games, and they didn't, and then they ended up getting pretty much jet-lagged because the Brewers are hot right now, and the Brewers are a good team. And I thought the Brewers would win that series anyways, But it made more sense for the sweep because just the Rockies didn't seem like they had it anymore.
That does seem to make sense because I'm looking at the scores from all 3 games of this series. The Rockies put up 2 runs in the first game and then did not score the rest of the series.
And that's not Rockies, but averaging one run a game, you'd be
Right.
like, okay, that's not true. You're lying about that score. And so you're right. And then I think they didn't even play good in Game 3 either.
No, not at all.
Yeah,
not at all.
and
it was a shutout, 6-0.
Yeah, and they actually had the elements in that game. It was very cold. It was raining in Colorado. Milwaukee plays in the dome, so they're not necessarily used to that. And they still screwed it up, and they still didn't end up, doing anything. So, yeah, you got to win the big games, and the Rockies kind of showed they're still the Rockies a little bit. not to talk, but they haven't won much, as a franchise because they kind of rely on their hitting, and if their hitting isn't there, you're kind of screwed.
Listen, they play in a ballpark where it's almost like Yankee Stadium. I mean, a lot of people can hit home runs.
Yep.
It's a very hitter-friendly ballpark, right? So when they're playing against the elements, if there's rain or snow or anything like that involved, or if they're playing on the road, maybe it's a little bit more difficult for them. And so I think that does play a factor when you're talking about this Rockies team that, yes, I think they were a very, very good home team, and they will continue to be. But on the road, can they sustain those hits and those home runs and that type of offensive success that they were so used to this season? And I think it just kept caught up to them, like you mentioned, with the jet lag and all the traveling and that type of stuff. And the Rockies proved that they are who we thought they were, which was a good team, but not good enough to advance.
Yeah, no, and the Rockies did get a little further than they did last year. They ended up they lost the wild card game, crazy game in Arizona. They get further, but they get one win further. That's it. So those series were kind of not predictable, but you could see those two teams advancing. Now the 2 series that were a lot more interesting were Dodgers and Braves and the Red Sox and Yankees. And when I say Red Sox and Yankees, of course, that's going to be a big series. That ended yesterday, so we'll talk about that at the end of the segment. We'll move on to Dodgers real quick because going into this series, the Dodgers, there's a lot of craziness too at the end of the season. They went from San Francisco to LA to play in game, and then all the way over to Atlanta a couple days later, so it wasn't the easiest schedule for them either. But the Dodgers had been playing playoff baseball for essentially a week before the playoffs started because they had to battle the Rockies, and they almost didn't make the playoffs. It was coming up to that last series, whether they were even going to make the playoffs or not. So the Braves were kind of sitting at home, preparing themselves. You didn't know how it was going to be. And it ended up being more the Dodgers kind of dominating the series besides one inning in the third game with a big grand slam from Ronald Acuna. But other than that, there wasn't much from the Braves offense. The Dodgers pitching, to me, as a Dodger fan, was surprisingly good in this series. I didn't think Ryu would pitch as well. Kershaw's had his struggles. They both shut the Braves out in the first 2 games. That was amazing to me. And then Walker Buehler struggled a little bit, only for 1 inning, though. And then Rich Hill pitched well. So the starters really impressed me. I want to get your thoughts on that, too, because I'll get the unbiased opinion on this. But the hitting still, to me, for the Dodgers, they ended up winning the series. The Braves didn't have much. They ended up curtailing at the end of the season. I was just talking about with the Indians. The Braves probably should have been in the wild card game based on their record and stuff like that. So again, they're not, it's a little different because the NL wasn't as good this year, so every team was kind of even. But the Dodgers hitting, man, it's still home run or bust. And there was a lot of times in that Game 3 where they ended up losing, where they had men on base. And instead of trying to put a ball in play with 2 strikes, the Dodgers are swinging for the fences. And I don't know how far it's going to get them because, they have a lot of great players. They have David Freese, playoff guys like that. You know what I'm saying? But it's just tough for me. I think they need to change this home run, walk, strikeout, the 3 most common, elements in sport or in baseball. They need to get this out of their heads because there was a lot of chances where they could have won easily in that Game 3 and they didn't. So, Jared, what's your thoughts on this series and just the Dodgers' overall production on offense?
I want to go straight to Game 1 because as a person who is a fan of baseball but not necessarily a Dodgers fan, I was a bit surprised that they started Ryu over Kershaw. Mm-hmm. And yeah. I think initially it's just when you think of Kershaw, you think, okay, he's the ace. He's been the ace for however many years for this Dodgers team and organization. He is arguably the best pitcher in baseball for the last, 7-8 years? There are other pitchers, obviously, in there. Verlander, Scherzer. There's a lot of other guys that we can throw into that mix. But Kershaw is always at least in the conversation. So to see him, in a sense, getting benched in Game 1 when you would think you always want your clear number one ace going Game 1 was a little surprising to me. But then, as I started to think about it a little more, up until last season, when Kershaw actually had a really, really good postseason, up until then, he was not Kershaw at all in the playoffs. And I think that was the biggest knock on his career. That during the regular season, you can argue he was probably top 5 best pitchers of all time in the regular season. But when he got to the playoffs, for some reason, he just choked. And he was not able to produce and help the Dodgers win. So finally last year, he kind of gets over that hump a little bit. But especially going into the first Game 1 of the playoffs, obviously I know they had to play kind of a game to get in, right? But I was surprised. But Rue played very, very well. It was his first playoff start since 2014. So that was another kind of gamble.
He didn't make the roster last year.
Right, right.
The Dodgers roster is so crazy. Just to give you statistics, though, Ryu... his stats on the season, he had an ERA below 2. So, obviously it was surprising that Kershaw didn't pitch, but I wasn't necessarily disappointed to see Ryu in there because I think what ended up happening was because of all the craziness at the end of the season with the Dodgers, Ryu and Kershaw were on normal rest for those games, and I think the Dodgers didn't see a reason to go on short rest for Kershaw because they had already made it to the division series, but... I still agree with you. The Dodgers kind of made an executive decision there and said, yeah, Kershaw, you haven't been that good in the playoffs. Like, yeah, you did good last year, but then the World Series is kind of messed up too. So it's, Ryu has not had a bad start literally the entire season. So I think that's why they went with him. But still, I agree with you. Very surprising that Kershaw didn't end up pitching.
Right. And so it obviously paid off. I want to jump a little bit ahead and just get your quick thoughts because I did pick the Dodgers to win this series overall. Obviously, they won in 4 games. The Braves ended up winning Game 3, kind of squeaking that one out. I believe it was 6-5.
It was 6-5, right? But it was based on one inning of offense from the Braves and not much after that.
Exactly. Do you think the Dodgers do the same going into this next series? Or do they start Kershaw?
They've already said they're starting Kershaw.
Okay.
Yeah, and they said they would start Kershaw in Game 5. They said Kershaw was, during Game 4, they say Kershaw's pitched the next game, whether it be Game 1 of the National League Championship Series or it's Game 5, which would have been such a horrible thing to watch tonight. As a Dodger fan, to have to watch Dodgers play today would have sucked.
Oh, boy.
Especially after that Game 7 last year. You just don't want that kind of stuff happening. But there's no Yu Darvish this year. So it's okay. It's okay, guys. We don't have to worry about it. But,
let's not go there.
Yeah,
I don't want to get started.
The Dodgers end up advancing. But real quick on the hitting. What did you see from the Dodgers hitters in the series?
Well, Game 1, they put up 3 home runs, right? And that was kind of an instant spark as, okay, listen, we don't have Kershaw going, we have Ryu going. We need to go here.
Yeah, Josh Pearson lead off home run in that game.
Right. That right there. I think. Listen, and I've said this many, many times, and I will continue to reiterate myself. Pitching when it comes to the postseason is very, very key, and I will take pitching over hitting any day of the week. I think that eventually, after hitters, go 6-7 innings, you'll be able to kind of get a feel for what the pitcher does. But I think a consistent pitcher like a Kershaw or one of the all-time great pitchers that can go a solid 6-7 innings and kind of relieve your bullpen and not have to use up your bullpen, I think that is very key. And I will take that over hitting any day. But if you can also get a couple runs early and kind of, allow your pitcher to get into a rhythm. And even if he does give up a couple hits and maybe even a run, he's like, you know what? It's all good because I know that my guys have already put up a couple runs. I think the confidence level and factor with Peterson able to start off that game with a leadoff home run was key and really, really huge for Rio because he said, listen, I know my guys are going to go out and hit, right? I can come out here and I can be a little more relaxed. I don't have to be as tense. I don't have to pitch a perfect game. And I think that was very key. Let's say the Dodgers were going into the 5th or the 6th inning and they hadn't scored a run yet. I think that would have just put more pressure on Ryu, and who knows what would have happened. Like I said, it was his first postseason start since 2014, so over 4 years since he's had the pressure of pitching in a playoff game. So I think a lot of things were going through his mind, but the fact that he was able to pitch with a lead, knowing that his team was hitting well, I think that kind of settled him down and gave him the confidence to say, all right, I don't have to be perfect. I'm just going to go out and do my thing. And obviously he did that.
Yeah, no, it was, it ended up working out for the Dodgers. Like I said, besides one bad inning from Walker Buehler, really just a couple batters, the Dodgers really dominated that series, pitching-wise. So it's going to be completely different with the Brewers, but we'll get to that in a second or maybe a little bit later in the next segment. But let's move on. Yankees and Red Sox. I think this was the top series for most baseball fans. Whether you're a Yankees or Red Sox fan, you kind of had to get into the series. Obviously, I had a little unique take. I actually got to see Game 1 live, so that you don't usually get to do that. But this is, this series. I have a couple friends that are sports fans, not necessarily baseball fans, that were hooked on that series, and they would follow the Dodgers because they knew I liked the Dodgers. But they were like, I want to watch Yankees Red Sox, right? And so the series, the Red Sox win Game 1. It's a close game. Bullpen kind of almost blows it. Game 2, the Yankees show their power, get 2 home runs from Gary Sanchez, who came out of the depths of hell, essentially, to hit those home runs. Judge remained hot. David Price is still playoff David Price. We talk about Kershaw. Man, David Price is like one of the worst pitchers of all time in the playoffs. This guy just... What I loved, too, was Game 3 when they have the players come out on the line and they announce all of them. So they said the game's at Yankee Stadium, right? So you're booing all the players and stuff like that. And I can attest, when I was at Fenway, all of the Yankees players got booed when they did this. When David Price got called, the crowd erupted like they hit a home run. It was like one of the funniest things I've seen in a while. It was great Twitter video to see David Price just get lit up. But he deserves it because the guy's been terrible in the playoffs. But so he blows Game 2, and then the Red Sox just murder the Yankees in game 3, 16-1. I think that was the turning point. Not hard to say that's a turning point, and I think it was hard for me to say the Red Sox weren't going to win that series after that game.
Right, Game 3, Holt with the first career postseason cycle.
Doesn't that seem like that doesn't make any sense?
Not at all.
Like we've been playing baseball for like 3,000 years, and like there hasn't been a postseason cycle. It's amazing.
That's pretty big. Yeah. But yeah, I think you're right. I want to start with this Game 3. I think this was the turning point. It's not just the loss; it's the way that you lost.
Yeah, it's terrible,
right? Game 3 was in Yankee Stadium, correct?
Yeah,
I believe so.
The first game in Yankee Stadium.
First game in Yankee Stadium, and you get completely destroyed.
Luis Severino just cannot figure it out in the playoffs either.
Right. So it's one thing to lose a playoff game. It's one thing to lose a playoff game at home. It's one thing to lose a playoff game at home to the Red Sox. It's a completely another thing to get destroyed by your longtime rival at home like that. I think that basically ended this series, even though in the Game 4, the closeout game last night, the Yankees put up a huge fight in the 9th inning and came back and were 1 run shy of tying the game. Sanchez was a couple feet away from hitting walk-off home run. But yeah, I think the psyche of these Yankee players after that Game 3 when they lost by 15 runs was completely hurt. Yeah. And like I said, to do it at home or to have that done to you at home against a rival opponent like the Red Sox, I think really just kind of they dug their own grave like that. Exactly. You can't come out and have that type of performance in a postseason at home like that. It's just, I don't understand it though. I mean, the Yankees have been kind of, in my opinion, hot and cold as far as their bats go. They'll come out and, like Game 2, they come out and hit a couple home runs, right? Judge plays well, Sanchez plays well. But I want to get your opinion. Giancarlo Stanton.
I was just about to bring him up too. I'm glad we're on the same page.
Giancarlo Stanton. Where was he in the playoffs?
I think he thought he was still in Miami.
Because... if I'm correct, the amount of money that he's getting paid, he should have been hitting for the Yankees. And I don't remember. I'm pretty sure throughout the entire series he had 4 singles.
Yeah,
I don't think that equates to the amount of money that he's being paid. I think he owes the Yankees money. He needs to give back like 3 game checks worth of those playoff series because he just stole money from the Yankees for the disgusting performance that he just put in.
It's just, I mean, my dad played minor league baseball, and he's looking at Stanton, and Stanton stepping in the bucket, half his swings. It's just, okay, I was saying this last night too, and Yankees fans are going to hate this, but J.D. Martinez was a free agent till January, February, okay? J.D. Martinez is the MVP in probably all of baseball. Okay, if there was a collective like the NFL, that J.D. Martinez is winning the MVP. Okay, he almost had the triple crown in all of baseball this year. And so you traded for Stanton. That's great. That was probably a big deal. He hit 59 home runs last year. But J.D. Martinez was a free agent until February, and nobody signed him. And the Red Sox even kind of gave him a BS contract, too. That guy has performed in the playoffs. That guy has performed the last 3 years consistently, batting over 300 and hitting 40 home runs. Stanton, man, he's very, very sketchy at points. It's just a lot of strikeouts, or there's 10 home runs in 10 games. And this is one of those stretches where when you get to the playoffs, man, you got to have consistent bats. And Judge is a consistent bat. But you're right. Giancarlo Stanton disappeared. You know, like I said, did he think he was playing for the Marlins and there wasn't playoff games? I don't know, because the guy didn't show up. He showed up a little bit in the game I was at, where he hit a couple singles on high fastballs. But other than that, man, he did nothing. You know, it's disappointing.
I'm sorry, he had 5 hits.
Oh, 5.
We'll give him an extra hit.
Okay, there you go. Yeah,
5 hits. It is disappointing,
but no home runs. Right?
He had 1 home run.
He hit 1 home run?
1. He did have 1.
I must have missed
it. The problem is, and what I'm trying to get at, we understand that Giancarlo Stanton is a great baseball player, but you make a name for yourself in the postseason. And obviously for the Marlins, the Marlins, they were never really postseason contenders throughout Giancarlo Stanton's career or tenure with that organization. The reason why the Yankees brought him on was obviously because of his bat. Yankee Stadium is a hitter's ballpark. You already have Aaron Judge and Sanchez, but they said, hey, we have the money. Why not go out and get another bat? You know?
Well, exactly. And they trade for him, and they can afford it. The Yankees can afford it.
Right.
So it's you know, they didn't even need to sign him to a big contract. His contract was already paid, so it was just easy to see what was going to go on.
Right. But at the end of the day, you bring up a great point about J.D. Martinez. I want to bring up another point about the pitching. And I think, was it worth the Yankees going out and trading for Giancarlo Stanton, or would it have been more important for them to go and whether they acquire or trade for more depth, either in the starting rotation or in their bullpen? Because, listen, all the hitting and the home runs and the stats and all that stuff, that's going to put fans in seats for a regular team. The New York Yankees are not just a regular organization, right? They are top 5 in the world as far as most profitable franchises go. So this team every single year expects to contend, right? So these Yankee fans and even fans of just baseball are expecting the Yankees to produce. And when you get blown out at home in Game 3 against the Red Sox and don't really put up much of a fight in the rest of this series, and you get shut out or basically sent home in your first postseason, the first postseason appearance, that's not good. I think you have to look back to this signing of Giancarlo Stanton and say, was this really worth it, or should they have kind of put their priorities and their effort and energy into the pitching?
Yeah, I mean, and you look at this, you're making great points. So they did trade for J Happ. But
okay,
you know, J Happ is J Happ. He's not a big time starter, right? And J Happ gets chased in the 3rd inning. I was there, and the crowd
not
just
Scherzer. Yeah. He's not a Verlander.
Exactly.
So yeah, J Happ's good, but I don't put him up there with those elite pitchers. And like I said, for the Yankees that had the money, and you're the New York Yankees, you don't even have to do that much of a sell job, right? It's like, if you want to win...
Hey, we were 1 game away from the World Series last year. Come join us and you'll be in the World Series.
Exactly. Right? So
Garrett Cole was right. The Astros signed him.
Right.
But so they had J-Happ. J-Happ gets chased. Tanaka pitches great. Tanaka was their best pitcher. And then who you thought was your ace, Luis Severino, this is the game where we're not going to allow any runs. They give up 10 runs in 3 innings. And it's just like, you're right. They needed like that extra guy. Severino needs to figure it out, but he's supposed to be their ace. So I think that could be their guy. But he's been Kershaw and he's been David Price in the playoffs recently, where he hasn't pitched very well. We need to go to break. The segment's going a little long. On the other side of this break, we're going to be jumping into the NFL to switch topics a little bit. But a little later in Cover 5, we're going to jump into the championship series and kind of predict those a little bit. But so this is the Cover 2 podcast on OC Rock Radio.
Wide open, and Smith, what a way to do it! A 62-yard touchdown pass is the way that Drew Brees fittingly goes into the record book.
Drew, congratulations on this record. You've done it the right way. All your hard work and dedication have paid off. You and I have come a long way since this picture back in 2000 when you were in college and I was in my 3rd year in the NFL. So, way to go. Proud of you. Good luck the rest of the way.
Welcome back to the Cover 2 podcast, live on OC Rock Radio. Once again, I'm Jared Smith.
And I'm Nick Nina.
And we are jumping into some NFL talk. We have a record-breaking quarterback on Monday Night Football. We have all of the entire rookie quarterback class winning this past week. And we have, of course, some Dallas Cowboys drama.
Yes.
That we are going to get into a little bit later. But first, we are starting with Drew Brees, who on Monday night passed Peyton Manning to become the NFL's all-time leader in yards passing. It was an incredible 62-yard touchdown pass to the Saints rookie Traquan Smith that got Drew Brees the record, and it was a pretty emotional thing for him as the game completely stopped. The referee stopped the game. Drew Brees' family was down on the sidelines. He was able to go down and hug his wife and his kids. The fans everyone was on their feet cheering for him. It was a great accomplishment and a great moment because obviously something like this does not happen every day in the NFL.
No,
this is
yeah.
a very, very rare feat that will probably not be broken for a long time. I believe Peyton Manning had this record for 3 years.
He came out with a video. I think it was like 1,000 days or something.
Yeah, 1,000 days. So I don't see this record being broken for a very long time. At least another couple of years, if not even more. But Nick, I want to get your thoughts on this game since it was really a blowout. But more or less, I want to talk about just Drew Brees and all of his accomplishments.
The game was a no contest. The Saints, moreover, are kind of back like they were last year. They look like they're good. But this seemed like a game the Saints were going to win the whole time because of Brees' whole record-breaking performance. Very fun to watch. We were just discussing in the last segment a 16-1 Red Sox-Yankees game. Well, that game turned into a blowout right about the time when Brees was about to break this record. So it was like perfect timing for sports fans, and ESPN must have loved it because they had a lot of people go over and watch that game and probably stick on it because the playoff game was a no contest. So, it was cool to watch. It was perfect that they scored a touchdown because then you can kind of stop the game and it's not a big deal. You make a big play or whatever, and let's say you're at the 2-yard line and that's when you break the record and it's third and then you don't want to stop the game. It's not as big of a deal. It was perfect. The way the Redskins played defense on that play, it almost seemed like they were just going to let him get that record on that play because it was just nobody covering 2 receivers. But, very cool for Brees. He's a good guy. This is one of those good guys in the NFL, right? And so you root for a guy. He's the short quarterback. He'll always be known as the short quarterback, right? And so for him to break this record, and I was talking to my dad about this because he's going to get up there in the touchdown record too. He has 499 right now. He almost got 500 in this game. Him and Brady will be battling for that for the rest of the season. When he gets all through it, there's an argument that pound for pound, height for height, he's the best quarterback in the NFL just because of his height and his disadvantage compared to a John Elway or a Tom Brady or even a Peyton Manning or a Dan Marino. He's the short guy. So I'm not here saying, I'm not out here saying that he's the best quarterback of all time, but pound for pound he might be because of his disadvantage in his height.
Drew Brees is hands down, in my book, no question, the greatest quarterback of all time, 6 feet and under.
Yeah. Oh no, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, exactly. And that's to say, I'm saying pound for pound because you look at like a heavyweight boxer or something like that, or a heavyweight UFC fighter, and you go, okay, well that guy is the best of all time. Well, no, maybe it's Demetrius Johnson, who weighs 135 pounds and has won 17 straight fights. You know what I'm saying? Or it's Floyd Mayweather, who is small but it was undefeated. So there's an argument there for Brees, and he is breaking records. And I'm glad that like not one guy has every record too. It's kind of cool. You have Manning with the touchdown record. You have Brees with this record, and then you know what I'm saying, Brady has the Super Bowls and all that stuff. So it is cool. But it just good for Brees, and it just doesn't seem like he's slowing down either. It's a lot like Tom Brady, where it's just like these guys, these records are going to just keep getting moved up, right? You have this younger generation of guys, and obviously the league passes a lot more, so you might see this record broken. You know, I see more of the rushing records probably not being broken, or Jerry Rice's record not being broken, more than I see Drew Brees' record of possibly 80,000 yards, because the league is a passing league. But it is cool, you know, to see a guy like this win this and get this, and especially since it was in New Orleans, and you know he played for San Diego or whatever, but New Orleans is his team, right? And when Peyton Manning got the passing record, he was in Denver, and that really wasn't his team. So it was super cool to see him get it in the Superdome, the same place where they had the Hurricane Katrina game and all this stuff. So I thought it was awesome. One of the better NFL moments in recent memory, I would say.
Right. And my question that I'm about to bring up to you in no way takes away from what Drew Brees has done throughout his career. I respect the man. I would love to have him on the Dallas Cowboys. I think he's, like I said, the greatest quarterback in NFL history, 6 feet and under, and you can put him in the probably top 10, top 15 quarterbacks of all time. I think he's that great. His perseverance, obviously getting drafted by the San Diego Chargers, and then having his career almost finished, and then being able to be traded or come over to the Saints when Hurricane Katrina was going on, and the way that he was able to help rebuild that city through the sport of football. All of that is unquestioned. But does this record and the record that will one day be broken, does it have an asterisk next to it because of the way the NFL is played today? And what I mean by that is because of basically the lack of defense that is allowed to be played. Like, defensive players can't really touch offensive players after 5 yards, right, from the line of scrimmage. There's, you know, all the concussion protocols and the safety rules as far as helmet to helmet and protecting the quarterback, and all these rules that favor the offense and basically just make it tougher and tougher on defenses. Does that in a way does it take anything away from these records that could potentially be broken by these offensive players? Or is it still just, you know what, this is such a phenomenal record that none of that really matters? Because to me, as a defensive player, and I played offense as well, but as a cornerback playing in high school and in college, it's just tough to watch defenses because they can't do anything. I mean, you breathe on a guy, right? You eat onions, and then you go and you breathe on a quarterback, and you're going to get a 15-yard penalty.
100%.
So it's just tough for me. Like I said, I'm not trying to take anything away from Drew Brees, but it's tough to not have some type of asterisk or something next to some of these records when it's just become easier and easier for offensive players to put up points and yards and stats and all that stuff.
I don't, in Brees' case, no, I don't affect it. We have like a, you look at this era of quarterbacks, and you have Brady, Manning, Brees, Big Ben. You could throw Brett Favre if you want in there. I think he's a little older, so you don't put him in that same thing. But I think all of those guys, they played enough in the era where Ray Lewis still could knock your head off, and Ed Reed still could kill you on the field. And so I don't think these guys, it's necessarily a knock. I think maybe them breaking the records is a little bit due to the game. But no, I don't think Brees, Brady, Manning, or Big Ben breaking any of these records matters there should be an asterisk because the game changes, but the game changing doesn't mean you should just put an asterisk. I mean, maybe you put an asterisk on players in the MLB hitting home runs because now they're not taking steroids and maybe 550 home runs looks more like 7. You know what I'm saying? You get into this gray area of weird stuff. I think if a guy were to come up now, let's say we're going to talk about the 4 rookies. Let's say Josh Allen comes out and breaks the record in 20 years. Well, no, he'd probably break the record in 15 the way the game is played.
Right. That
is like, then you go, yeah, he's probably not better than Brees'e. He broke the record, and it's unfortunate. But yeah, I don't think it's enough to put an asterisk. I disagree with you on that. I think those era of quarterbacks, those big 4, add Favre into it if you want. Those are the guys that still count under the old NFL because, Brees'e was playing in 2000, Brady was playing in 2000. Big Ben won the Super Bowl in 2005. The Saints, they won the Super Bowl, 2007, 2008? These were years where you still could knock the hell out of people and they still did Jacked Up on ESPN. So
right. That was a great series.
That's one of the best sports shows of all time. But so I don't think those guys necessarily are in it. I think I see a picture of Patrick Mahomes possibly breaking these records later in life. Yeah, that probably would be more of like he was good, but was he really better than Brady or Manning? It was more impressive, at least, with Brady and Manning. And, the most impressive is Dan Marino, because they didn't even pass back then. I don't understand how that guy has so many yards. But, so, no, not necessarily. I don't think there's an asterisk. I think you still give that era of players the leeway.
Okay, I was just asking the question. I'm not saying that's how I'm thinking. I'm just saying...
I was thinking about that too, though. I was thinking about that too the other day. It's like, Brees'e, he's like, someone said he had like 10 5,000 yard years. And it was like, but like the last 5 probably are a little sketchy. But Brees'e is still an all-time quarterback. It's not like that. It's not like you look at the steroids in baseball, right? Barry Bonds probably would have got to 500 home runs, but he got to almost 800 because of steroids. A-Rod got to almost 700 because of steroids. Sammy Sosa, so that's a little different. I know that was cheating. That wasn't a rule change. But those guys literally changed history because of something that wasn't supposed to happen. Some BS, like a lot of these NFL rules. And that's where you put the asterisk. I don't think you necessarily do it with those guys. But, Patrick Mahomes, Josh Rosen, Sam Darnold, all these guys coming up, there's going to be need to put an asterisk if they break these records because the game has changed. I still think, like I said, the NFL, the passing records are going to be broken and all that stuff. But the rushing records, if one of these guys ever breaks like Eric Dickerson's single season record or like the all-time rushing record, that's going to be really impressive to me. Or I don't think anybody's going to break Jerry Rice's record because Larry Fitzgerald's, I think, second or third on the list, and he's not even close. So, no, I don't think there should be an asterisk on those quarterback stats.
Okay, all right. I just had to ask.
Yeah,
I just had to ask.
I was thinking the same thing though.
Okay,
when I was watching the game.
Let's transition to some of the games from this past week, and specifically all 4 of the first-round rookie quarterbacks who were drafted this past year won games this week for their teams. I'm talking about Josh Rosen for the Arizona Cardinals. I'm talking about Sam Darnold for the New York Jets. I'm talking about Baker Mayfield for the Cleveland Browns. And I'm talking about Josh Allen for the Buffalo Bills.
Yeah.
Let's start with your Cardinals.
Okay.
Because I know you're obviously a big fan of them. They're having somewhat of a down year. Sam Bradford starts the year at quarterback for them. Their offense
we haven't talked about Rosen being the quarterback yet.
Right, pretty horrific. And now they make a change, and Josh Rosen, the rookie, is now their guy. Uh-huh. I want to get your thoughts on how you think he's played so far, and the Cardinals getting a much-needed first win of this 2018 season.
Let's just say it's been a tough football season for me, and thank God the Dodgers are in the NLCS. If you look at the teams I follow, NFL, Cardinals, up until this last Sunday, were 0-4. The UCLA Bruins, 0-5. My brother's high school football team hadn't won a big game. They were like 2-5 going into this, So, football season has been terrible for me so far. As far as teams I support, the overall games that have been going on have been great. The NFL has been very entertaining this season. But, the Cardinals were the most unentertaining team until Rosen took the reins. Obviously, you had the craziness in Week 3 where Rosen comes in for the final drive of the game. Didn't agree with that decision. I think you write out Sam Bradford in that game. Because Bradford hadn't played terrible. They had scored 2 touchdowns. But, and then Rosen starts, and they should have beat the Seahawks. It was multiple drops. It was bad play calling, and it was the defense getting tired again in that game against the Seahawks. And then this game, it finally worked out. So Rosen threw a 70-yard pass that was in the air for 54 yards. Pretty impressive. I think I saw a stat the other day that said it was the first 50-yard pass that traveled in the air 50 yards in 50 years for the Cardinals, or something crazy like that. Yeah, it was like the first time in a while, I think, since not 50 years, but I think it was since Jake Delhomme was the quarterback, way back when. But yeah, Rosen's different. Rosen, it looks like he's comfortable. Obviously, with David Johnson in the backfield, you can do a little more. But Bradford played like a scared dog, okay? And it just the guy was worried about getting injured. You could tell he was checking down the minute there was any pressure. Mike McCoy is the offensive coordinator. With Sam Bradford was not going to work. They needed to put Rosen in. They probably should have started Rosen to begin the season, but I was on the Bradford bandwagon too, so I'm not going to sit here and say that. But Rosen looks like a different quarterback, and I'm excited as a Cardinals fan to see him play. I think the Cardinals can win most games with Josh Rosen as their quarterback. Okay, the defense has played pretty well for how much they played. I don't know if there's a stat, but I think the Cardinals defense has been on the field more than any defense this season, and that's a combination of bad offense the first 2 games, and then quick touchdowns and more bad offense in the second game. Or second and third and fourth and fifth game. So, it will be interesting to see, but it was good for Rosen to get it finally when he deserved it in Week 4. Didn't get it because of drops and just overall bad play from the rest of the team. But I'm excited because they finally get their first win. And going against Minnesota this weekend, I don't see it as a total blowout loss. When the Cardinals went to go play the Rams in Week 2, I bet against them. That's how much I thought the Rams. It was different. But going into Minnesota hasn't played the best. The Cardinals have a chance, in my opinion, with Josh Rosen in these games. With Sam Bradford or Mike Glennon, they didn't have a chance. Rosen, they do.
The one thing I will say about Josh Rosen is that he is a gunslinger. He doesn't care what anyone says, and he will take chances. And I don't think he cares that he's a rookie. He wants to go out and prove that he deserved to be chosen in the top 10, which he was. And so, yes, obviously he will make mistakes, but I think that he will obviously take more chances and try to create more opportunities for this team to score. I think he understands that the defense isn't where it should be, and that this offense needs to pick up the slack in a sense, and they need to average over 20 points a game to be competitive in these games. Because if they're scoring in the teens or below, they're probably not going to win. So I think he understands that. And so from that standpoint right there, I think that's probably the difference. To whereas Sam Bradford, I'm not saying that he can't go out there and sling the ball around, because we know how good of a quarterback he can be when he's healthy. But the problem is, because he's been around the block, he understands, hey, listen, you know what? I can read defenses a little better, so I'm not going to take certain chances, as to where Josh Rosen is just saying, listen, you know what? I'm a rookie. I'm a gunslinger. I'm going to go out there and I'm going to make something happen. And if I throw an interception, I throw an interception. But you know what? At this point, I don't care. I think he just has that mentality of, I'm not purposely trying to hurt my team. But at this point, we're sitting at 1-4. We need a spark. The coaches put me in the game for a reason. I'm going to try to be that spark. So, and you're right. Minnesota's defense has been awful. They lost to the Bills at home a couple weeks ago.
Got killed.
They got killed.
It is
they got shredded by the Rams offense on Thursday night, and then they actually played a pretty good game last week against the Eagles and had a good game. But this Minnesota defense is not what we thought they were going into the season. They were the number 1 overall ranked defense for all of 2017 last year, and this year I believe they're in the bottom 10.
Yeah,
so it's not good for them.
They were my Super Bowl pick, so it's I don't even understand what's going on with them.
Not good at all. Not good at all. So the Cardinals definitely do have a chance. Let's move on to a couple of those other rookies.
Yes.
I know we did just mention the Bills. They squeaked out a win, them and Josh Allen, against the Titans, 13-12. Josh Allen came into this combine and this draft process as having arguably the strongest arm of any of these quarterbacks, and definitely the biggest guy for sure. What are your thoughts on Josh Allen? Because obviously they're not inning here, they're not lighting up opponents. They're not putting up 20, 30 points a game, but they're able to do enough to win. Do you feel that he is the Bills' future, or do you think it's still too early to tell?
No, I think he is the Bills' future. All of these rookie quarterbacks are the futures of their teams. And finally, we have Rosen finally playing. He was the last one to play. But, I disagreed with them playing Allen early in the season, but then I saw, the rest of their quarterbacks play, and I was like, okay, he needs to be out there because they have nobody. And he's played well. He's played well for the talent he has around him and the overall atmosphere of that team. They're probably, they're not going to make the playoffs. They're probably winning 4 or 5 games, but there's not a lot of hope. But he's giving those fans hope, and that's a good thing. And just like Rosen as a Cardinals fan, he's giving me hope. When I go to watch a game, I go, Cardinals can win. Well, Cardinals could beat anybody at this point. I mean, you look at the season for the Cardinals, and they had Minnesota and the Packers and the Falcons on their schedule this season. All of those teams have disappointed so far. So it's, every team can win. The Bills probably looking at it like, the Patriots have kind of disappointed a little bit this year. Maybe we could beat them and stuff like that. So I don't know. Allen, I disagree with playing him, but I have to go back on my word and say that I think now it's a good idea. He's playing well. I think he's the future. I think the fact that he's even getting this team to wins is amazing to me.
I think that he was forced to be put in
because
of the lack of quarterback play. I think if the Bills had, if Tyrod Taylor was still on this team, I think Tyrod Taylor would be the quarterback
100%.
right now.
Tyrod Taylor's actually a quarterback.
Right, and I think that was the Bills' mindset going into the season was we don't necessarily want to play Josh Allen. Maybe towards the end of the year, if we're just not being competitive or if it's a blowout game, we'll put him in so we can get some reps. But I think their game plan going into this year was to let Josh Allen sit and learn and not just throw him into the fire, right? These quarterbacks aren't getting paid $50, $60 million contracts like they used to coming straight out of college. So there's not as much of a risk, and you are able to sit these players until they're ready, just like Aaron Rodgers did and some of the other great quarterbacks who came in as rookies. But obviously because of the lack of quarterback play by the Bills, A.J. McCarron gets injured. Peterman is just god-awful. He shouldn't even be on an NFL roster, in my opinion.
No.
So they were basically forced to put Josh Allen into the game. And listen, this is what you're going to have. You're going to have ugly, scrappy games where it's going to be 13-12, right? You're going to have a lot of drives that are going to turn into punts. And then you're going to have some spectacular plays where he's able to chuck the ball down 50, 60 yards down the field and make some plays. So you're just going to have to live with the good and the bad. I think Josh Allen is the one quarterback out of all of these rookies that I think has probably the brightest and biggest upside. But as of right now, I think he has the biggest learning curve as far as all of these other quarterbacks.
Yeah, true. And I think you get talent around that dude, and he's good. The Allen and Rosen situations are very similar. Just lack of offense. You had to put him in there, or you're risking your fan base turning on you completely. And these guys are succeeding. Now, moving on, two fan bases that probably expected guys to play were Baker Mayfield and Sam Darnold, the Jets and the Browns fan bases. And both of those guys have, they played well too. And the cool thing about this weekend, you talked about, who did the Jets beat real quick? It's the only one I can't figure out who they beat last week. I was on a plane most of these.
The Jets beat the Broncos.
Okay, yeah.
So surprisingly good
you
Broncos
look at
defense.
The Jets upset the Broncos. The Bills upset the Titans. The Cardinals, probably not an upset against 49ers, but they won. And then you have Baker Mayfield upsetting the Ravens. These rookies are leading their teams to wins they shouldn't get, okay, which is a cool thing. That's what it's cool about this rookie class. Not only did they win, but they led their teams to wins they shouldn't have done. When I do my pick 'em every week, besides the Cardinals, I picked against all those other quarterbacks, and they all beat me. So now I got to think a little bit more when I do, So it's cool for the NFL that all these guys are doing well. Jared, I want to get your thoughts, though, on Baker and Darnold. Was there anything different you saw this week than the last couple weeks with their big wins, or would they just solidify that these guys are now kind of number one guys, and they're going to be good in this league?
I have to say, I was surprised from the Jets-Broncos game. Listen, the Broncos, we know that their offense kind of is what it is. It's middle of the pack. Some weeks they'll put up points, some weeks they won't. Defensively, I would have expected a lot more, right? This defense still has Von Miller. They drafted Bradley Chubb. You have Bradley Roby on the back end. You have Brandon Marshall, a very, very good linebacker, right? You have players at all three levels that are very, very solid. You have Chris Harris Jr., who's a very good slot corner and can play outside as well. But literally, the Broncos defense was not able to stop the Jets' run. The Jets were able to run all over this Broncos defense, and because the Broncos then had to put more guys in the box, it freed up the outside for the receivers and the tight ends. So Sam Darnold was able to just literally pick apart this team. They put up 34 points against the Broncos defense. The Broncos defense should not ever give up 34 points. They're way too good for that. So I'm not sure if you want to credit Sam Darnold or if you want to kind of sit here and blow up the Broncos defense. I think it's a little bit of both in that sense. Kind of going over to Baker Mayfield and the Browns, they just do what they do, man. Yeah. I mean, listen, like last week, they're in a close game with the Raiders, and because of a couple kind of key, missed calls, I want to say, the Browns end up losing the game. This upcoming week, or this past week, this most recent game against the Ravens, it goes into overtime, and they end up kicking the field goal.
More missed field goals from the Browns kickers.
But it's like every single week. I mean, I don't care who is the Browns quarterback. The games are just going to be close. What I will say about Baker Mayfield, the energy that he brings to this team, it's almost like whether you're a receiver, a tight end, a running back, you think you're getting the ball on every single play because Baker Mayfield is not afraid to throw the ball around just like Josh Rosen. And so I think because he's willing to take those opportunities, you have to live with the mistakes and the interceptions. But at the end of the day, at least he's willing to go out and attempt those types of passes, right? As to where the Browns quarterbacks in the past have been so bad that they weren't even attempting those passes. So I think there's a lot of upside again for Baker Mayfield. And the fact that this team is being competitive in games, right? I'm not sitting here saying they're going to win 8, 9, 10 games. But if they can just stay competitive like they were against the Ravens and squeak out a win in overtime, I think that's pointing, the signs are pointing up for this team. And I like the way that he's played so far.
Yeah, no, it's been fun talking about the gunslingers mentality. It seems like all these rookie quarterbacks have the gunslinger mentality, which is good. You don't have these guys being tentative. We talk about Nathan Peterman of the Bills. Very tentative player, and that's why he throws interceptions and stuff like that. So it's going to be fun to watch the NFL the next couple of years because these guys are really good. We ran out of time in this segment. We want to talk about a little bit more. We'll add this segment. We keep running so long. We have so much to talk about. A lot of good stuff going on in the week. We'll add a little bit of NFL talk, more about the top teams in the NFL into Cover 5, just in a little bit. But on the other side of this break, we're going to be doing a good old game of Do You Care? First Do You Care in 2 weeks. So Do You Care on the other side of this break? This is the Cover 2 podcast on OC Rock Radio.
That Steelers holdout running back Le'Veon Bell plans to return to the Pittsburgh Steelers during the Week 7 bye. That means that he will not play the next 2 weeks, that he does not plan to come in the next 2 weeks, but he would be back during the bye, which would get him back in time to be there for the second half of the season.
The Phoenix Suns have fired their general manager, Ryan McDonough. He's been with the team for 5 years. He took over the Suns, and they had some massive improvement, that is, from 2012 to 13. But last year, they were in last place in the NBA. They've missed the playoffs for so many years in a row.
Here's the quote from Woj's reporting. At one point in the scrimmage, sources says, Butler turned to GM Scott Layden and screamed, "You bleeping need me! You can't win without me!" Butler left teammates and coaches largely speechless. He dominated the gym in every way. Jimmy's back, said the source.
Back here on the Cover 2 podcast. Once again, I'm Nick Nenad.
I'm Jared Smith.
And Jared, do you know what time it is?
What time is it, Nick?
Jared, it's time for the first time in 2 weeks, and the first time in October this year, it's time for Do You Care?
Don't blow everyone's ears out.
No, I don't want to blow everyone's ears out. That would be mean. Okay, so lots to talk about here in Do You Care? We're also doing Cover 5 a little bit later, so these are going to be more minor little stories that we want to talk about. We're going to get into more in-depth stuff with some of the other sports besides football and baseball in Cover 5. But right now, this isn't Cover 5. This is Do You Care? Don't want to be biased. So, Jared, like usual, you get the first question of the day. Jared, do you care that Jimmy Butler has been... there's been trade rumors swirling about him recently.
No, I don't care, and it's because nothing has happened. For those who don't know, Jimmy Butler came out about a month ago and went to the Timberwolves organization, basically the head honchos, and said, trade me. I don't want to be here anymore. I don't like the direction that this team is going in. Obviously, he is a Tom Thibodeau disciple. Tom Thibodeau drafted Jimmy Butler when Thibodeau was the head coach of the Bulls, and that's where Jimmy Butler made a name for himself. And then Thibodeau traded for Jimmy Butler later, I believe it was over a year ago. Well, Jimmy Butler has now decided that he wants a fresh start, but he is under contract, so he cannot technically leave the Timberwolves. The Timberwolves would have to trade him.
It's like Earl Thomas with Seahawks.
Exactly. So Jimmy Butler doesn't really have a whole lot of firepower right now, and he's just trying to push at the Timberwolves to get something done. The Timberwolves, this is a very unique situation. The Timberwolves general manager and president do not want to trade Jimmy Butler. They want him with the team. They understand how good of a player he is. They understand that he's a potential superstar. I would put him in that star category. I wouldn't put him up there like top 5 best players, but he's definitely a difference maker, right? The Timberwolves owner wants to trade Jimmy Butler and is okay with trading Jimmy Butler and is already on record with talking with other teams saying, if you want to trade with Jimmy Butler, come directly to me and we can work something out. And why I say that's a unique situation is because the Timberwolves organization is not all on the same page. And that is where turmoil starts, and that is where things start to unravel. If I'm a player in that organization right now, I'm not sure that I want to be there. Because if the owner and the general manager and the president and the head coach cannot all get on the same page about this roster and where this organization is heading, then it seems like this team is probably not going to have a good year, right? It just, if like I said, if the organization at the top is not strong, then usually that kind of falls down to the players at some point. They still have good players. They have Wiggins. They have Karl Anthony Towns, right? They have very good talent around them. But if I'm Jimmy Butler, I don't blame him for wanting to leave. The Miami Heat have been probably the most notable team that has seemed to have the most interest in trading for Jimmy Butler, but those trade talks have fallen apart. So as of right now, there's no real fire to this story. So if something happens, then yes, I'd be interested. But as of right now, it doesn't seem like much of a story to me. Nick, sticking with basketball, do you care that the Suns, in a surprising move, have fired their general manager, McDonough?
No, because I'm not a Suns fan. But this is it's very interesting because it's a week before the season, and McDonough has been a pretty solid GM for them. He's kind of been rebuilding their roster. It takes a long time to rebuild a roster. And they're very hands-on owner. I don't know what his first name is. His last name is Sarver. He did this with the coach last year. He fired the coach really right before the season started. And then now he fires the GM. McDonough is the brother of a member of the front office for the Cardinals as well. So there's a little family stuff there. I didn't know who he is. Also, the McDonough, the announcer, used to do Monday Night Football. They're all brothers.
Oh, wow.
It's all the same people. Yeah.
Okay. Didn't know
so,
that.
So kind of a famous sports family there. Yeah, I don't understand it. It might be a GM an owner that doesn't necessarily know what he's talking about a lot. You don't see this too much, but sometimes owners get a little too on top. But what I like about, let's say, Steve Ballmer with the Clippers is he's a fan. You see him getting excited. But he's not as hands-on. He gives Doc Rivers, he gives Jerry West the hands-on materials, and he's not going out there and firing everybody. This dude Sarver from the Suns seems to be doing that, and it's unfortunate. We'll see if this hinders the Suns, because it did seem like they were not turning a corner, but they were going to be a little bit better this year. They weren't going to be like the worst team in the NBA, and with guys like Devin Booker and other dudes, they looked like they were moving up. But when you fire a GM, You never know. I'm hearing rumors that it might be James Jones, the guy that was always on LeBron James' championship teams but never played.
He's been an assistant general manager
for the Suns. You're right. Yeah.
Right,
So
right.
I'm hearing that he's kind of the guy that is more than likely going to be the GM, and that's fine. And maybe Sarver's in the room and just says, I think this James Jones guy has more creative ideas. Maybe he can do more. I don't know about that, because Jones just retired. Doesn't it seem like he just was playing like 2 years ago in the finals. So don't know how much that guy would know about rebuilding a team when he's in the finals every year. But nonetheless, very interesting, and we'll see how the Suns make it out this year. Jared, do you care that Eric Reed was signed by the Carolina Panthers?
I do care. And Eric Reed has been in the spotlight most recently for obviously siding with Colin Kaepernick, kneeling during the national anthem, and most notably not being on an NFL team up until last week, mainly because of his decision to side with Colin Kaepernick and kneel during the national anthem. The NFL during the offseason came out and created a new policy that players, if they choose to come out to the field during the national anthem, they must stand. They don't necessarily have to have their hand over their heart, but they have to stand. They can choose to stay in the tunnel or in the locker room and do whatever they choose to, but if they come out on the field, they have to stand. And if they do not, they will get fined and other consequences, so on and so forth. The Panthers finally decided to take a chance on Eric Reed, who is a very good safety and should have been signed because of his talent.
Absolutely.
Before the season even
I wanted
started.
the Cardinals to sign.
Right.
Yeah.
So finally, the Panthers, with their new owner and new leadership, decided to take a chance on Eric Reed, knowing the kind of backlash and complications and everything that could come with this. Well, what does Eric Reed do? The first game that he comes out in uniform during the national anthem, he kneels. Mm-hmm. He continues to kneel. I believe, I'm not sure if he tweeted before or after the game, that he will continue to kneel and support Colin Kaepernick's movement. So I'm not sure what the Panthers organization and Eric Reed talked about, but this organization is obviously okay with Eric Reed doing this, or else they would not have signed him in the first place. I'm happy for Eric Reed that he is in the NFL, because from a talent standpoint, he deserves to be in the NFL, just like I feel that Colin Kaepernick does. These players should not be out of a job, especially with some of the quarterback play and some of the lack of safety talent that is in the NFL right now. These two players should be in the NFL based on their talent purely. But obviously, because of other things and other factors, the owners are not willing to sign these players because they do not want the backlash. And at the end of the day, they do not want to lose money from fans who are choosing to not watch these games. So this will continue to be an ongoing story, and we will see if Eric Reed continues to kneel and if a team ever does take a chance on Colin Kaepernick. But yes, I'm very excited about this and happy for Eric Reed. Nick, do you care? Another very interesting and long-going topic. Yeah. Le'Veon Bell will return to the Pittsburgh Steelers in Week 7, sources say.
Jared, this is a game within a game. So this is Do You Care, of course, right? We're in the middle of it. We're going to take a short break and play the game. Did Le'Veon Bell report to camp this week? No, he didn't. But next week, he probably will, right? Next week is Week 7, right? That would make sense?
Yes,
okay,
next week is Week 7.
I'm missing in Boston the whole week. I don't know what's going on. But, so this is the last time we will play this game. Well, actually, no, we'll play one more time next week. But yeah, so Le'Veon Bell says he's going to return Week 7. He realized, I think you were saying he didn't have to show up till like Week 8 or Week 10 or something like that.
Yes, he has to play the final, I believe, 6 games of the season.
Okay, so yeah.
I really quickly, I think the reason why he's returning Week 7 is because they have a bye, if I'm not mistaken. And I think that would give him an extra
training time?
week. Yeah, I'll look that up right now, but I'm pretty sure he has a bye so he can get himself acclimated and have an extra week of practice before they go play. That's
cool. It's smart. It's cool to finally see him going. And the Steelers are starting to finally pick up their stride a little bit. They started the season kind of off. That might have been due to the Le'Veon Bell stuff and just, some bad play calling and not giving the ball to Antonio Brown and stuff like that. But, it's cool to see him come out. I don't know how this team will react to them. Obviously, you had all the linemen call him out right before the season and stuff like that. So a little bit of a combustible element there in Pittsburgh is going to happen. next week. The Steelers have a pretty tough game this week. Who are they playing again?
At Cincinnati.
Yeah, that's tough. And Cincinnati's 4-1. One of the surprising teams. I had Cincinnati not making the playoffs this year. So a little surprised they are doing that well. But that's always a big rivalry, a lot of big hits, if you remember the game last year. But so they have a tough game this week. If they can get that, and then they get the bye, and then they get Bell back, Steelers back. Man, I think this could be very, very good for the Pittsburgh Steelers and good for the NFL, too, because you want to see these star players return and stuff like that. But, we'll see. We'll see if he actually does it. Like you said, he doesn't have to come back this week, but it makes sense with the extra week to get prepared, a little tiny bit of a training camp there with the bye week. So, good for Bell and good for the Steelers. I'm glad that debacle is kind of finally over. Jared, do you care that Lonzo Ball is returning to the Lakers preseason lineup after an off-season injury?
I do care. And if LeBron James was not on this team, I think this would be a bigger deal than what it is, right?
Deal.
Lonzo Ball ended up having like a minor surgery in the offseason to repair some damage in his knee. And he is, I think, ahead of schedule because I think a lot of people didn't think that Lonzo Ball would be ready for the beginning of the regular season.
I didn't think so.
And now head coach Luke Walton is saying that Lonzo Ball will get some minutes in these last couple preseason games before the regular season starts. So I think that is great as far as Lonzo Ball's conditioning goes and for being able to practice and get a feel for what it's like to play for LeBron James. Obviously, we all know the skill set of LeBron James and how great of a scorer he is, but he's also just as much of a great passer. He likes to get his teammates involved. And for Lonzo Ball, someone who's used to having the ball in his hands and making plays, he will probably have to now play a little bit more without the ball. So he's going to have to get used to running up and down the court without the ball and looking for an open shot or getting open to find an open shot. So I think this is good for the overall team. And I think another great thing is they don't necessarily have to rush him back. You have Josh Hart, you have Kyle Kuzma, you have KCP, and obviously you have LeBron James. So you have some guys, Rajon Rondo, right? So you have players in place that can kind of hold down Lonzo's spot until he is fully healthy. It's not like, oh my gosh, this is the star player on our team, and if we don't have him, we're not going anywhere. So I think the good thing is this team can rest him and make sure that he's completely healthy. But the fact that he is already playing in preseason games and getting some live looks, I think that only benefits this Lakers team moving forward. Nick, last question for you, and I know you're going to like this one because this was probably one of the most interesting things that happened in sports in the last couple weeks. Do you care that in the UFC fight, Conor McGregor and Khabib, that Khabib not only won, but there were some extracurricular activities after the fight ended?
Yeah, as you might know if you follow what I do, I'm a fan of professional wrestling, right? And there's a lot of theatrics. There's a lot of you win a match, and there's stuff happens after the fight, and people get attacked and stuff like that. And it's play along. It's scripted. It's supposed to happen. It's a TV show, right? Well, UFC is not a TV show. UFC is combat sport that is on pay-per-view. And a lot of things can happen, but most of the time it's in the octagon. Guy can get knocked the hell out, right? We saw that. Derek Lewis, my God, one of the most brutal knockouts I've seen this past week at UFC 229. You saw that. And Conor McGregor ends up getting choked out in what was a pretty good fight with Khabib. And then after, Khabib wanted to keep going after him, and then he had to be held back by the referee, and then Khabib took his mouthpiece and threw it through the over the octagon at one of Conor's people, and the camera shot went to Conor McGregor recovering from injury, and then you see Khabib jump over the octagon wall and jump feet first into the crowd and incite the biggest brawl I've ever seen in a UFC fight. The entire first row of people was just fighting each other. It was the corner men, so it's not like these were fans getting in a fight. But then, so you thought it might be over there, right? Khabib jumps into the stands. But then three of Khabib's corner guys jump over the octagon and assault, beat up Conor McGregor. They threw punches. They connected with some. They attacked him from behind. Like I said, I watched pro wrestling. I didn't think I tuned into a pro wrestling event that weekend, but that's what ended up happening. And Habib's pay has been withheld so far. It tarnished what was a great win and the most defining win in Habib Nurmagomedov's career. He looked like a terrible champion, jumping over the stands. I get he said in the post-fight press conference, which I'm surprised they even let him do, but he said that I apologize for jumping over the cage, but why is this the talk? Why isn't the talk that McGregor talked about his family, talked about his religion, talked about his country? I don't necessarily agree with that, because I think the whole part of UFC and one of the big reasons people watch it is because of the trash talking. And sometimes it gets personal, especially with Conor McGregor. I mean, we saw with Floyd Mayweather and them last year, that little press conference tour they did. So I think Habib's just not used to that kind of stuff and took it personal. Obviously, this went way back to Conor McGregor throwing a dolly through a bus window around April and Habib slapping one of Conor McGregor's friends. So this was probably one of the more personal fights in UFC history. It ended up being crazy. Unfortunately, they went in the stands. That can't happen. You can't have a guy who has legal weapons as hands jumping into stands where fans are. It just can't happen. I know as a Cardinals fan, Larry Fitzgerald goes to a lot of those fights. I don't need him catching an elbow from Habib jumping in the stands because he went to go watch a fight, right? So I like that there was craziness, but I don't like that the UFC doesn't seem to have control of what happens during these fights. And I think they need to change that. I'm not trying to be, a sourpuss here and say that I didn't like it. I did enjoy it, and I got to see that fight. But a little too much at the end of it, especially McGregor getting attacked from behind. I thought that was a little too much.
Very quickly,
yeah.
Quick answer. Is there a rematch?
I think there's going to have to be. Conor McGregor's at a point where, because he, has $100 million in his bank account, he's only going to do big fights. I only see him doing fights with, say, Nate Diaz or Habib. What I see Conor McGregor doing here is just waiting for the Habib fight. You train. He looked a little rusty, and that made sense because he hadn't fought in the UFC in 2 years. He had boxed, but he hadn't actually fought in the UFC. So I think if he prepares, you give him a long time, maybe in the spring of next year or the summer, you have this fight happen again. I don't think Habib's losing until then. Some challengers, Tony Ferguson can fight him and stuff like that, but I think Habib is the best fighter in UFC right now, barring maybe behind John Jones. But, so I see there being a rematch for sure. There's too much controversy. I don't know how it couldn't happen. But I don't see it happening for a long time. I don't see Conor McGregor fighting for a long time. All right, that's the end of Do You Care? We need to move on. We're going to come back with Cover 5. And just to give you a little preview, we're going to be talking about the Rams and Chiefs. Who can beat them? Who can contend with them? They seem like the best teams in the NFL. We're going to be predicting the NLCS and ALCS, who we think is going to win in those series. Talking a little college football, 5 minutes of what happened last week, and then I'll give you a little take of the NHL season just began and give you who I think are the contenders and who are the pretenders in the AHL. So a little bit of Cover 5 and final thoughts coming up on the Cover 2 podcast.
Marlowe and Matthews are the next over the boards. Here's Patrick Marlowe to Matthews. He scores! Another big opening night for Austin Matthews. Leafs win on opening night, and Tavares and Matthews didn't disappoint.
This is what the Associated Press top 10 says. Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State, Clemson, Notre Dame at the top, followed by West Virginia, and going all the way down to UCF. What do you think about that? As the Knights are still undefeated, nation's longest winning streak, and they are 5-0 this year, and hoping to work their way into the conversation. Long shot though it may be.
Back here on the Cover 2 podcast for the final segment of the day. We're going to jump right into it. It's Cover 5. I told you what's going to happen right before the break. So we're going to jump into the college football season right away. Put 5 minutes on the clock if you want. If you're playing at home, we have 5 minutes to talk about this segment, and then we have to change. So college football, Jared, we see that Alabama, Clemson, Ohio State, Georgia, they're kind of at the top right now in college football. Then there's a lot of teams behind them. You have Auburn, LSU, if they could get big wins over Alabama, they're in the mix. Michigan has a huge game against Wisconsin this week. They could stay in the mix. Penn State barely lost to Ohio State, so they're still a little bit in the mix. Notre Dame, like you mentioned. Who are your teams that you think could possibly jump into the top four that are not named, Clemson, Ohio State, and Alabama?
I would say Notre Dame is probably the hottest team right now. Notre Dame is now ranked number 6. They went into Virginia Tech and put a good beating on them. It wasn't really much of a
also
game.
beat Michigan earlier this year.
And also beat Michigan at home at Notre Dame week 1. That was a close game, 24-17. But for Notre Dame beating Virginia Tech at Virginia Tech 45-23, I think that was probably their best win of the season. They did beat Stanford, who at the time was ranked. But I think Notre Dame is just, they've clicked, right? Coach Kelly has finally gotten his team rolling after last year. It looked like, I was surprised that he was even the coach beginning this year. I thought he was going to get fired after last season.
Kelly, you mean, right?
Yes, Brian Kelly. The way that team has basically underachieved for the last couple of years. But they found their quarterback, and they're doing really well. So I would say Notre Dame, who is right now sitting at number 5, just obviously one spot away from being in the college football playoff, I would say they are the closest thing to being in if one of these top 4 teams falls right now. So yeah, I'm going to give it to Notre Dame.
Yeah, I'm going to say Michigan, only because they kind of control their own destiny. If I'm not mistaken, they do play Penn State still this season.
They do.
And they still play Ohio State this season.
They do.
So that, to me, I think they're at number 12 right now. They played Wisconsin this week. That is a huge game. They're at home, so I would expect them to win, and Wisconsin's not as good as they were last year. If Michigan can beat all 3 of those opponents, they're in the Final Four. I think they're the best team. It's just if they can do it. And like we've mentioned in the past on this podcast, they don't win on the road. So those games are going to be on the road, I believe, right? Against Penn State and against Ohio.
They get Penn State at home.
They get Penn State at home.
The last game of the season, they're at Ohio State.
Yes, and then so going into that game, they could potentially, that game could be for a Final Four spot, because Michigan and Ohio State are in the same division in their conference, so one of them is making the Final Four more than likely, and one of them's not, because they can't both play in the Big Ten championship game against each other. But so I think it's Michigan that's really outside. I was going to say Oklahoma, but then they end up blowing it to Texas. I think Texas is way too high ranked. I think they got a big win against Oklahoma and haven't had that hard of opponents this season. I think you'll see once they get to like Oklahoma State, TCU, they'll probably lose those games. But I was going to say Oklahoma, not anymore after this last week. You cannot lose to a rival that is not better than you. Oklahoma is good. They end up firing their defensive coordinator. But I see it being Michigan. And then, of course, like we've mentioned, you could have Auburn or LSU get in there too if they were to beat Alabama. Because I think Georgia, they're in the easier side of the SEC, so they're probably going to get in. And Alabama does seem like they're rolling. But if you lose to those teams, you probably don't end up making it because their schedule is just not as good. So Alabama's got to go undefeated. But so I think you're looking at it, if I'll say 2 of them, even though we're not supposed to. Michigan, and then a combination of Auburn/Alabama or Auburn/LSU could make it into the Final Four, but I don't really see that happening. I think it's just going to be those 4 teams I mentioned.
No love for Washington sitting at number 7, huh?
No, because they, as a UCLA fan, they should have murdered UCLA last weekend. It didn't happen. Now UCLA is getting better and stuff like that, but no love for Washington. Pac-12 is not as good this year. USC is underperforming. ASU underperformed after a big upset. U of A is not very good. Stanford has underperformed since a big win against USC that really doesn't look like that big of a win anymore. So, no, Washington's good, but I see them, I just see them not having a tough enough schedule necessarily compared to these other teams. I think these other teams will roll and get in. All right, so we got to switch topics. We're coming up on the 5-minute mark. We're going to switch. We're going to stick with football. We're switching to the NFL, back to the NFL like we did earlier. Rams and Chiefs, Jared. Both these teams are 5-0. They seem like the bell cows of the NFL. Kind of similar to the college football question. Do you see? Name some teams that are around them that you think could topple them come playoff time. Because I remember when I was saying the Chiefs are good. They don't have a very good defense. I think they'll lose some of these big games. They haven't yet. And they faced the Jaguars, and I think they put up 30-plus points on the Jaguars' defense.
They did.
A lot like we were talking about the Jets with the Broncos'
Very
defense.
impressive.
They also beat the Broncos, too. So they're proving now that even with their bad defense, they can still win games against these top teams. They do play the Rams this year, so one of these teams won't be undefeated at the end of the season. But who do you see as contenders for both these teams in the NFL?
For the Chiefs and the AFC, the easy pick is the Patriots, right? It's like the Patriots are always there. They're always going to be competitive. Tom Brady's doing his thing. The Patriots look like they're starting to get back to the Patriot way. You get Julian Edelman back last week for his first game, and so this team is starting to look like they're going to, make a push again. Cincinnati Bengals right now are sitting second, only behind the Chiefs at 4-1. The Bengals look like they're for real, and I would not have said that at the beginning of the year.
And even with Andy Dalton,
so far, Andy Dalton has impressed, and keywords was so far, because that does not mean he cannot regress and go back to the Andy Dalton that I'm sure.
Oh, it's not playoff time yet, though.
Exactly. Yeah, so for right now, you have to throw the Bengals and the Patriots in there for the AFC. For the NFC, I really think there's only one team, and it's the Saints. And listen, the Saints defense has been mediocre. They've had a couple games where they've given up major points. One game that comes to mind is the Tampa Bay game where Fitzpatrick put up like 42 points or something like ridiculous like that. But the Saints offense is legit. Drew Brees, obviously we know how great he is. Michael Thomas, Traquan Smith. They get Mark Ingram back to go along with Alvin Kamara. So I think offensively this team is completely loaded. And I think they could challenge the Rams from an offensive standpoint. I'm not really sure. I think if they were going up against the Rams, I think the Rams would be able to pick apart the Saints' defense. But from an offensive standpoint, I definitely think the New Orleans Saints are right there. So there's not a whole lot of teams. I think there's a very few amount of great teams in the league right now. There are a lot of good teams, and then you have the mediocre to bad teams. So the upper echelon are obviously the Chiefs and the Rams. I would say those are the only two I don't want to say complete teams, but best teams in the NFL. And then I would throw the Saints, Bengals, and Patriots to round out the top five.
Yeah, I'm going to have to agree with you on most of what you said. I think you can add the Steelers in the AFC, especially getting Le'Veon Bell back. I think they're going to be good. I think it's got to be a team that can score, though, right? And Cincinnati seems like they can score. Like the Jaguars, I would have said that, but they proved this week that if they can't score against a good team, it's just the Chiefs are good enough to where they're going to score, and Jaguars were. I didn't think they'd be as good this season. I'm so far correct on that statement, but I just don't think that kind of team can do well in the playoffs. So the Bengals are good. I don't know about them, but their record's showing me different, just like the Chiefs. So I'll keep the Bengals in there. The Patriots adding Josh Gordon and Edelman in the last couple weeks. I think that's a force to be reckoned with. And I also think the Steelers. The Steelers are going to start getting better, and Steelers were my Super Bowl pick as far as the AFC goes. So I'm still going to stick with them. I think now they're even proving it a little bit better. As far as the NFC goes, I think you're right. The Saints with Drew Brees and a veteran quarterback, I think could beat them. But man, the Rams just look unstoppable. It's tough for me to even say that there's a team out there that can beat them. I mean, earlier in the season, you could have saw the Falcons, the Vikings, the Eagles, but I'm not gonna. The Rams are too good. They're gonna beat those teams. I mean, they proved it this week. I thought they were gonna lose the Seahawks during that game because I was like, Seahawks at home, it's tough. They still have Russell Wilson, and they still squeaked out a win, which was very, very impressive to me. So, I think you're looking at the NFC. It's the Rams, and who's gonna step up and try to beat them in the playoffs? Because I think they're going to the NFC Championship game, and whoever's there. That's the only team that could beat them in the NFC. If I had to pick right now, I think the Rams are winning the Super Bowl. I just don't think... I don't even see them losing like more than 2 games this season, period. So, they are very, very good. I've gotten to the point now where I'm starting to cheer for AFC, for the rest of the NFC teams to let the Rams win the NFC West. We got to move on. We're a little bit past the 5-minute mark on this one. The NHL season began while I was in Boston. I didn't even realize it. I was on LA Kings schedule and thought every team played to start the season. I was wrong. It's like the NBA, so that's my bad. But so the NHL season started, and obviously last year you had the Washington Capitals win the Stanley Cup. Vegas Golden Knights surprised, and you had like the Winnipeg Jets were really good. And there's obviously still the Pittsburgh Penguins, Boston Bruins impressed. So I'll start off with this one. I think, You look at it, and the Capitals, I think, are still going to be a contender. I would have said the Penguins, but they just lost Matt Murray to I believe it's a concussion. He got a concussion in practice. I don't know how he got it, but he had a concussion in practice, so I think he's still a force to be reckoned with. And so those are kind of my Eastern Conference teams. You look at the West. The West is a lot more wide open. You expect Chicago to be a little better. Not necessarily a contender, but you expect them to be better. The Kings have gotten better. The San Jose Sharks have gotten better. They added Erik Karlsson in the offseason, one of the best defensemen in the NHL. And then, of course, you have the Vegas Golden Knights and you have the Winnipeg Jets. Golden Knights, they lost some players from last season. They still have Marc-Andre Fleury, their star goalie, but I don't know if they're going to be able to do the same thing they did last year, so I'm not going to say them. I really think it's going to be between the Winnipeg Jets and San Jose Sharks, a couple of suburban teams. I don't know if Winnipeg's necessarily a suburb, but it's not a famous city. So if you're looking at ratings for the AHL, I apologize, but those are my two teams I think will end up getting in. The Sharks just have too much power on defense and offense, and they have a good enough goaltender in Martin Jones, a former King. And then I think Winnipeg Jets, they were one step away. They couldn't control that Golden Knights fever last year, but they've impressed so far this season, and I think they are a really good team. Surprise team also, Toronto Maple Leafs. They've added John Tavares. But they don't have much defense, so I'm not going to say they can win the Stanley Cup. But so if I had to predict the Stanley Cup really quick in a 5-minute segment, I'm going to go Penguins and Sharks, a rematch of 2016, 2015, a little rematch of the Stanley Cup a couple of years ago. I think that ends up being the thing, and I think the Sharks win the Stanley Cup. Unfortunately, I'm a Kings / Ducks fan, and I hate for the Sharks to do anything good. But I do think they're the best team, and I think they'll end up being the Stanley Cup champions. Jared, real quick thought on the NHL. I know you don't follow it as much, but quick thought on what you think is going to happen this season.
Right. You know what? I keep sticking with the Ducks, man, and that's only because they're the hometown team. It's the team that I get to see the most regularly, whether it's
lost Corey Perry though for most of the season. So
they
far,
did, but they've started off strong, going 3-0. They came from behind to get their third win against the Detroit Red Wings. They were down 2-1 in the second period and ended up coming back to win that game. So they did lose Corey Perry. That's a big injury, and I think throughout the season, as the season goes on, that will affect them a little more. But they look to be starting off strong, right? They beat the Sharks.
Because you have injuries. It's
right.
Big wins.
Beat the Sharks on the road already, beat the Red Wings at home. So from the Ducks standpoint, from the Western Conference standpoint, I think this team is... when are they going to get over the hump? Because they always look really good during the regular season. Obviously, you have patches during the season where you may go through a kind of a losing stretch. But for the most part, the Ducks always play well in the regular season. And then they get to the postseason, and it's like they can't make it out of the first or the second round. So is this the year that they can do it? Obviously, losing Perry for a while is not going to help.
Yeah.
The Sharks are very competitive, like you just mentioned. So can they get over that hump? We'll see if they can, but I thought that they had the team to do it, but after losing Perry, not so sure.
It's tough. John Gibson's a good goalie for them. And hey, nobody expected Vegas Golden Knights to get the Stanley Cup last year. So right. I could see the Ducks kind of surprising. These wins in the beginning of the season are huge for them, though, because you're not getting Perry back until the playoffs or March. He will come back eventually this year. It's not a bad enough
What was the injury again?
I believe it's a tear in something, and it happened in like warm-ups too. Something dumb. But I don't. In hockey, these guys seem to come back pretty quickly. Just the tough guy mentality. They come back pretty quickly. They're saying March, April, so the Ducks can get into the playoffs, and then you get Perry back. You have a chance. And with the Golden Knights, what they did last year, you never know in the NHL who really could get there. Nobody expected the Kings a couple years to get to the Stanley Cup and win twice in 2 years, or in 3 years, and they did it. All right. 5 minutes up on that segment. Last Cover 5 segment of the day. Back to baseball. We have an NLCS and we have an ALCS. Jerry, which one do you want to talk about and predict first?
Let's start with the AL.
Okay.
We'll finish up with the Dodgers.
Let's do ALCS. Red Sox and Astros. Man, what a freaking series, right? And the Yankees and Astros would have been good too. It would have been a rematch of last year's ALCS. But Houston, so much hitting. Great starting pitching. The bullpen's a little sketchy for them. And then you have the Red Sox. great hitting. I'll go good starting pitching. David Price, it's hard to say.
Take David Price out of the equation.
I think I get starting pitching. And then you have a sketchy bullpen. So very similar teams with aces like Verlander and Sale. That is a matchup I will watch every single day. This is a hard one to predict. I'm going to go with experience in this one. I'm going to go experience in coaching. AJ Hinch is the head coach. They're the manager of the Astros, obviously. Alex Cora was his bench coach. He's now the coach of the Red Sox. I think experience from AJ Hinch gets them past. I think the Astros return to the World Series. I think they have a little bit better of a team, although the Red Sox, ended up with the best record and look like the best team. But I just think the Astros are a buzzsaw, and I think they'll cut the Red Sox in half. I think it'll be a great series. Going 6 or 7 for sure. The series will return to Boston at some point. I don't think it ends in Houston. But I think experience gets the win in the managerial category, and I think the Astros move on. Although I did predict the Red Sox to make the World Series. I'm going to change my mind a little bit after watching both teams play. I didn't think the Astros would be as good. So I'm going to go Astros. The experience in managing gets them the win.
This one is such a coin flip.
Yeah.
You can make great arguments for both teams, and I'm not sure that I can make a confident pick right now. I think because the Red Sox have home field advantage, I'm going to lean their way.
Yeah.
But, pitching with the Houston Astros, with Verlander, and who else is there?
Garrett Cole.
Garrett Cole.
Dallas Keuchel.
Right, Dallas Keuchel as well, who's a very, very, could have been their ace, right, if Verlander was not there. But he's probably the third best pitcher now. So I think there's so many, and plus the Houston Astros have good hitting, as they've shown so far in this postseason. But because the Red Sox get home field, I have to give it to them right now. But I think I could very easily flip my coin to the Houston Astros. I'm not confident in my pick right now, so I'm going to stick with the Red Sox mainly because of home field. If it goes to 7 like you think it might, then I think I have to lean towards the Red Sox. But I don't know. This one's tough. I'm not confident with this pick at all. I think I'm just saying it just because we're on air.
I think this series depends on starting pitching, and the Astros look like they have the better one right now. Red Sox could come out, but David Price has been sketchy, man. He's the Andy Dalton of baseball right now. He gets into the playoffs and just dumpster fire. All right, got a little more than 2 minutes left, or a little less than 2 minutes left. Dodgers and Brewers. I think with this whole playoffs, I think these are the 4 best teams left, the 4 hottest teams. For me, I just think the Dodgers have more talent than the Brewers, and although the Brewers are hot, I think the Dodgers winning the series and not going back to a Game 5 helps them, as it gives them an extra 2 days to prepare for this series when they would have only had really 1 extra day. Now they get 3. You get Kershaw full rest, ready. The starting pitching was impressive in Atlanta. I think the Brewers can hit. I don't think this is going to be a clean sweep. I think this also could go 7 or 8. Or excuse me, 6 or 7, and could move on to go back to Milwaukee. But I think the Dodgers will handle it. More experience in the playoffs. I think the Dodgers want to get back to the World Series and try to get another chance to win it.
Dodgers win this series in 5.
Yeah,
I think that you kind of hit the nail on the head with a talent perspective. I agree that this is the 4 best teams left in the playoffs, but I think the Dodgers, when healthy and when they're on their game, are clear and above the better talent-wise team as far as that goes. So Kershaw, you're right. He gets a full amount of rest, and he's definitely already been named the starter. I believe out of the 4 teams left, he's the Dodgers are the only team that already named their starting pitcher for Game 1 in Kershaw. I think he understands the magnitude, and I think this Dodgers team still has that taste of losing the World Series last year. Right? They have not lost that, and they understand that they want to get back, and I think they want to play the Astros again. Yeah, so I think they're hoping for that. Dodgers in 5.
No matter what, World Series matchup's going to be great. You're either going to have the Red Sox or Astros in there, or you're going to have the Dodgers trying to redeem themselves. All right, so we got to do our final cut, our final thoughts here. We got 1 minute. Jared, real quick, what's your final thought on the day?
Jason Garrett, Dallas Cowboys head coach, needs to be fired. It's time. He showed in this last game against the Houston Texans, overtime, 4th and 1, and he chose to punt the ball. The Cowboys ended up losing the game. That type of situation, you need to take a chance. I think Garrett he's been the head coach for 7 years. He's had plenty of opportunities to win. He's only won one playoff game. It's time for Jason Garrett to go. My
final thought today, sticking a little bit with the Cowboys, Earl Thomas. Unfortunately, tears his Achilles. Or no, I believe he's broke his leg. Man, that sucks because he did not want to play for the Seahawks team, and he wanted to get a new contract and play for a team that would give him a new contract. Seattle's not going to do that. They should have traded him to the Cowboys. There's a reason he flipped off their sideline when he got hurt. Okay,
he got fined $13,000 for that.
Yeah,
by the way.
got there, but I don't think he minds. He's going to get paid by somebody, and it probably will be the Cowboys. All right, that's it. This has been the Cover 2 podcast. I'm Nick Dina.
I'm Jared Smith,
and we'll see you next week.